So you heard the recent news, student loans are back in action and you have to make your payments. It's been quite a bit of time since you've had to make a minimum payment on your student debt, but you have to get prepared, and here is the video that you're gonna need in order to get prepared for the upcoming future. Now, this is nothing different than what I typically do. It's just now with your student loans, you wanna make sure you're extra careful with planning so that you're able to put yourself in a position of financial security. There's 1.75 trillion of total student debt, including federal and private, and the average borrower is around 29,000. And I had student loan debt back in 2018. I had around 39,000, roughly $40,000. And the way we paid off this debt was just using the framework I teach every single BudgetDog Academy student. It's simple, it's to the point, but having a systematic approach in the beginning is going to help you get to a point where you can then begin to invest and begin to grow your wealth. Until you get past this initial starting point, it's really hard to move forward. So today I'm gonna show you exactly that framework.
So the framework I'm referring to within BudgetDog Academy begins with 3 financial statements. And these 3 financial statements should be cohesively work together in super simple approach to mastering your finances. So whether or not you have student loans, this still applies and everybody should be using this. I'm gonna give some insight into each one of these 3 financial statements high level. Then we're actually going to hop into the individual templates that I use. Of course, you can use your own. You can go download an amortization schedule online. You can go download a budget template, and you can go download a balance sheet. I can't say they'll be cohesively work together and very easy to use, but you can still do that. So the very first thing is the balance sheet. And this is the financial statement that tracks your assets and liabilities. So right here, assets and liabilities. The difference between those two are your net worth. It's super simple, but you need your starting point. So you need to know where you begin. And so for those with student debt, you have to list your liability, which is the student debt. And that's the total balance. That's not the minimum payment. The minimum payment will go down in the budget, which we'll talk about in a second, as an expense, but the total balance is the liability. Unfortunately, this is not a good debt. And of course, you could make the case, this got me a degree, which makes me income. Totally get it. However, when I say good debt, it does not have an asset that's attached to it. So for example, a personal residence, it will have an asset because the house is the asset. So if you sold that asset, the sale price would be the asset value. The liability would be the outstanding mortgage balance, not the actual payment, but the actual balance total. So if you have a $500,000 house, if you sold today, it was worth that, but you had a $250,000 liability, your equity, your net worth portion of that would be $250,000, or the difference. So if you sold that, you would have a $250,000 check. This is where the balance sheet comes into play. It starts the process of understanding where we sit financially, our measuring stick per se on our finances. Kind of like, hey, I want to go get in shape at the gym. Where do I start? What's my starting weight? Where is my starting point? Now, once we understand the starting point, then we can start to think about where do we want to get to? What is our end goal, and what are our goals associated with our financials? We will list those out here, and that can be either on a separate sheet of paper. You can even add it into the template here, whatever makes your heart content. I don't really care, but to understand where we're trying to get. So now we have our starting point, the balance sheet, and we know where we're trying to get with our goals. Now, how do we actually get there? And so there's other financial statements obviously below that are going to help us achieve this. And so knowing that we are going to update this on a quarterly basis and kind of track our progress in the balance sheet and understand where our starting point is at any point in time. Remember, our balances are tracked at any point in time here. So I personally do it on a quarterly basis to make sure that our balances are updated every 3 months. And I know my growth quarter over quarter with my net worth, which is always a very fun thing to look at, assuming that you're tracking it and it's going up. So secondly, is you see all these red arrows pointing to each other. And that's the reason why that is, because they all kind of cohesively work together. The second one I want to get to is the budget. And the budget is, I'm updating this maybe 2 times a month, 30 minutes a month. A lot of people have inefficient systems. That's why the Academy system is so efficient, because the way I present, the way the tools I provide, the simplification of everything, so that we get extreme data to the penny, but we also don't waste a bunch of time. So the budget here is going to be a zero-based budget, and we're gonna make sure we know every single aspect of our personal finances. So fixed income, variable income, fixed and variable expenses, one-time expenses, and savings and investments, or let's call it debt payoff on top of that. All of your income minus all of the other things I listed should equal 0. In theory, income minus expenses equals 0. So super simple. Now, our cash flow, in order to accomplish our goals of our assets and liabilities, comes from here. So that is why this arrow points up. So if our goal is to invest, our investments are listed on the balance sheet and we're putting, our cash into assets, which might be an index fund, might be an ETF, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a real estate property. And this cash flow that we calculate from the budget should be allocated here. Again, this is zero-based budgeting. So we first calculate the cash flow, then we zero it out and we add it to whatever goal we have. Now, if your case is student loans and you're wondering, well, should I pay off my student loans or should I invest? I actually have another entire video on that specific framework as to should I pay off debt or should I invest? However, let's say you use this cash flow to then pay off your debt. This debt, this liability or the student loan is still listed on your balance sheet. Now, what is the amortization schedule and how does this play within these two financial statements here? So now that we know our starting point, we know our balances and see where we sit, and we know the cash flow available to us, now we want to hop over to our amortization schedule, assuming that we have debt payoff. So an amortization schedule, think of it as a debt payoff timeline. Easiest way to look at it. This is going to list your principal, this is going to list your interest, and this is going to list every little detail about the specific debt. So every liability on the balance sheet will have an associated amortization schedule as well as an expense for that liability as a minimum expense or minimum payment on the budget. And that's why the three financials go together. Our amortization schedule can now calculate how fast we can pay this off. And the cool thing about my tools is when we understand our true free cash flow and we understand what our goals are, we can use this tool to see how fast it speeds up our debt. And you will see in this should I pay off debt or invest video that you can do exactly that. And it's going to map out specifically what you're trying to accomplish in the timeline in which you're trying to do it, as well as how much interest you're paying on that total debt. It actually shows you ways to input a specific dollar amount. I want to pay an extra, let's call it $1,000. How fast does it speed it up? This amortization schedule is so key because it's telling you the preciseness of your student debt. And throughout this entirety, you're not really spending a whole lot of time. Like I said, you're updating the budget twice a month, maybe. It takes about 30 minutes a month for me. My wife, once you get the hang of it, it doesn't take long. Once you have the framework, you have the system down, 30 minutes a month. Balance sheet is a quarterly basis. So we're just updating those balances on a quarterly basis to see our growth. We're not sitting there and updating this every day, every week, every month. It's too much time. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And now the amortization schedule, once it's updated, there's not a whole lot of extra stuff to have to waste to do time-wise. You pretty much have everything set up. The only thing that would change is if you input a different number on a monthly basis for an additional principal payment. We would want to update that to see the updated balance reflect. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of time or commitment to that. You can master your finances in no more than 30 minutes per month if you have the right system. Like I said, you can absolutely go to Google. You can absolutely go find each one of these statements elsewhere. You can create your own. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure you're doing it. So now I'm going to walk into each financial statement here specifically. So this is the balance sheet, and this is the detail behind what we had on the screenshot. So as you can see, I have a detail of what you own up here, of what kind of a balance sheet is. List all your assets, what you own, and all of your liabilities, what you owe at any given point in time. We are trying to track our net worth. That's the most powerful number created with an individual. A lot of people make a ton of money, but they don't have anything to show for it because they spend it all. And so as you grow wealth, you want to make sure your net worth is increasing along with your cash flow and income and things like that. And we take our income and our cash flow and we put it into good assets, and this is how you build wealth 101. So I have some examples here as well. I have a net worth allocation over here that kind of does a sum total of everything I have listed here. I did pretty standard, situations. Obviously, everybody's situation is going to be a little different. But for example, if I have cash in my checking or my account, $4,000, and maybe I have $2,500 in my savings, this is going to calculate the sum totals over here, which is really nice. So let's go through a little bit here and kind of give it an example of situation. So Jake has $1,000 in cash in an HSA. He's also investing a portion over and above that. Most HSAs have that $1,000 threshold, sometimes $2,000. Specifically, Health Equity actually has a $2,000 threshold. But in this example, I'm going to say $1,000. Investing the rest in index funds within the HSA. I have another HSA video for you. Top right-hand corner. It's going to be awesome. Best account there possibly is. The brokerage account, phenomenal account. He has 400,000, let's say, sitting over here. Add an extra zero. And then for retirement, he hasn't actually started, so we're going to leave this blank. And we just have zeros here. He has no kids, so child assets becomes irrelevant. He has a car worth $30,000. Let's call it a VW Atlas. That's what I have. So I have figured I'd throw it in there. I don't know if it's actually 30,000 or not. We bought it for 40, so I'm trying to think of what the actual MSRP would be. 35 maybe. Let's put it that way. And then he has no rentals at this point in time, or real estate he's renting, let's say. So renting wouldn't show up here. Now, if he did have a personal residence, rentals, that would obviously be an asset, and the sale price would go here, similar to this. Let's say his car did have a $15,000 liability and he was making a $500 a month payment. So the $35,000 would go here. Down here, vehicles would be $15,000. The difference is $20,000. So if he were to sell that, that would be a $20,000 check in his pocket. And a lot of times if people do have debt and they're trying to get out of it quick, here's a quick tip that you could easily do. Now, it's not practical for everybody, but if he were to make a $20,000 check, he could theoretically sell this, buy a $10,000 car, cheaper car with cash, take another $10,000 and then pay it off towards the debt. So he's killing two birds with one stone. He's getting rid of this liability and he's also getting rid of $10,000 of other debt that he has. Now, let's say the student loan is the big one. He has a $30,000 loan here, a $10,000 loan here, and obviously he's not married, or Kara's not around in this example. He has no credit card debt, thank God. Credit card debt should be your number one focus if so. And obviously he has no liabilities in real estate because he has no assets associated with that, as we talked about earlier. So if I looked at his assets, it says, he can put up here real quick, I'll put the last name. Let's call him Jake from State Farm. Jake, let's call him Henderson. I love the word Henderson. I don't know why. My wife always makes fun of me when I use that as an example. So the Hendersons, and as of, let's call it, it's roughly July 4th today when I'm making this video. So 6/30/2023. And that's as of 6/30/2023, and all of these balances below reflect that date. And you can see over here, he has assets of $410,000 total. He has liabilities of $55,000. His net worth, therefore, is the difference, or $355,000. And you can see a sum total right here, which is always nice to see, because when you're thinking about your goals and you're trying to allocate different numbers, metrics, etc., sometimes I like to see what the percentages of total assets are here. So maybe this divided by this number could be something I do, and I put a dollar sign because I'm savvy with Excel, of course. And then you just bring that down and you have a percentage, and you can see that 97% of his net worth is tied up in the brokerage, 1% in the HSA, 0% in crypto, and 2% is in cash. And so if you do have goals to realign that, now you have the actual numbers and metrics to do so, and that makes things a lot easier. Now, we understand his balance sheet situation, and remember, he has specific things like he has a liability in a student loan and he has a car. And so those should show up on the balance sheet, and they should show up on the amortization schedule as well. Every single liability should have an associated amortization schedule, and that's what you're seeing here with the two liabilities in red, $40,000 and $15,000. He has $55,000 in total debt. Let's go to the next financial statement. So here's the amortization schedule, and obviously we have other tabs in here that you don't have to be aware of or even worry about. But we have here student loans. So remember, $40,000. The minimum payment is $430 for him, and it's over a 10-year period. So if you go to the very bottom, you'll see the last one is crossed out, meaning it's a 10-year period or 120 months. And you can see the exact principal. You didn't calculate any of this because it's all you have to do is enter these yellow highlighted boxes. The rest of the schedule fills out for you. You scroll to the bottom, you see that he's going to pay $40,000. Let's call it $361 total, and then interest is $11,238 total. And then as they're going throughout this process, they can now use the cash flow from the budget to insert to figure out how fast they can pay this off. So let's just say from the budget, we calculate $250 extra per month that we can pay. We could just put it right here to see the total timeline and see how it shrinks it. So from 10 years to about 67 months, if you want to do this, an easy way to do it is 67 divided by 12 is 5.5 years, meaning you saved about 4.5 years off your student loan. So all of these crossed out boxes means they're done. Scroll to the bottom, that's 53 months that he saved by putting an extra $250 a month to the student debt. Very, very powerful, because now he knows exactly, precisely, without a bunch of time, I've done this in 3 seconds, to put it together to make sure that he has the exact amount of debt saved up. Same thing with car. Car is $15,000, and this is a 48-month term. 4% rate at $340 per month. So he sees, goes to the bottom, the last crossed out. He knows exactly the interest, the principal amounts. He can sum these columns up. And now he knows, hey, what if I threw an extra $500 to this? How would this kind of save me? Well, the last crossed out is month 19. So let's call it month 18. And 18 divided by 2 or divided by 12 is 1.5 years that he's going to save, or that he's going to be paying on this, meaning the remainder, which is an extra 30 months, is saved from debt payoff, from making those extra payments. So 30 months is saved, divided by 12. 2.5 years he saves by putting an extra $500 here. He does have a minimum payment. Remember, that will show up on the budget as well. Now, the progress bar as well is just kind of a cool tool as you guys progress throughout here. Let's say in month 10, he gets to this balance. He can do equal sign that, and he can see his progress update as he goes. And it's a very cool tool. Let's jump over to the budget. So we hop here into the budget, and we understand the goal here is to calculate free cash flow in order to fast track his goals. So this is the zero-based budgeting formula we were referring to earlier: fixed income plus variable income minus fixed and variable expenses minus one-time expense minus savings and investments. Let's call it debt payoff on top of that, potentially. So those categories should all equal 0. So when we first enter in the expenses, go through the budget, we enter all of his current expenses, fixed and variable. We enter all the amounts. It just then defaults the entire year as your baseline. So you save a lot of time. And so then therefore we need to know the actuals. And so we go here, these are all updated for you automatically. We enter the actuals. Let's call it twice a month. We use a budget app or a bank app that just sum totals this, so we don't waste our time every single time we go to the grocery entering a little tiny expense in, sum totals for us, and we put the total in there to the penny, but to the total. And then we see down here, his student loan is $430. Remember, minimum payment in car is $340. So that's the first step of the game. We know his income is $6,000 up here, and we're trying to figure out what additional we have. So we go to the summary tab and we see $2,500 available per month if he sticks to budget. So obviously if he goes over budget and spends more, he's gonna have less of a difference here, therefore slowing his progress. He gets really intentional. He wants to knock this out, and so therefore he has 6,000 minus this equals that, and he's like, where should I put this 2,500? Well, he has to put it somewhere. He has to either put it into expenses, fixed and variable, one-time expense, savings and investments, or debt payoff, or whatever. We go over here to the additional debt payoff and income, expense, and investment tab, and we know we want to pay off the student debt. So our goals are listed down here. Not going to get into too much detail of the spreadsheet, and say our first goal is student loan payoff, and we do student loan additional. Remember, this is additional principal payment. So we want to be very specific about what our goals are. Go down here, we might want to put this in here, student loan, just to update so we can see the progress, student loan progress. And then our second one is early car payoff. Obviously, this is just our additional principal, and we have everything set up between these two, car progress. Now, we have $2,538 to distribute. Now, he has to make a decision using the other financials to make sure that he knows where to allocate these dollars. And that's where he goes to my pay off debt or invest video to figure out exact numbers. Let's just use an example that he puts 2,000 here to make it easy and 538 here. And so therefore, if you go to the summary tab, now this zeroes out, because now we've allocated this 2,538 up into the zero-based budgeting formula. However, how do we actually apply this so it cohesively works? So we understand our cash flow. Now we got to go over to the amortization schedule to apply this. So earlier we were using a small example of an extra $250, but remember, we just put $2,000. So every month he's going to set up an automatic payment to do $2,000 towards this student debt to see the timeline. As he can see the update, now it's only going to take an extra 18 months. So essentially 18 months is pretty quick from his initial timeline of 120 months. He shaved off 102 months, which is absolutely fantastic. But he knows specifically, okay, during this timeline, I'm going to pay $1,500 roughly in interest, opposed to if I zero this out, the total interest was $11,238. He saved quite a bit of interest by doing so. And he also realizes if he goes to the car, he's putting an extra $500 over here. I think it was $538 exactly. He knows that he's now spending about 18 months as well. So his debt payoff is actually happens to be out on perfect timing of 18 months exactly for both debts, using his extra $2,538 to his advantage. This is the power of having a financial plan and having specific documents to tell you the details. This isn't hard. hard, but he knows exactly where this 2538 goes to. He will automate this entire process. He automates his bills, he automates his investments, he automates his debt payoff so that he doesn't let human nature get in the way of his success. He maps the entire process out. He works this through 18 months. He pays off all of his debt, especially his student loans, and boom, he feels a lot better overnight because he not only knows when it's being paid off, he knows exactly the timeline, he knows exactly how, and he feels a lot more confident. Although he hasn't actually paid his student loans off, he knows the exact route to go, and it gives him a lot more assurance. So understanding this is the key to getting ahead, especially when it comes to student loans.
So I hope the BudgetDog Academy framework presented today will give you some insight on how to pay your student loans, and I wish the best of luck to you. This is tough on a lot of borrowers, and I know by using the right financial principles that you will be able to overcome these debts. So best of luck, and I will see you next Monday.